Howdy, folks. I am Jeff Gonzalez, former Navy SEAL, founder of Trident Concepts, and the host of the Bulletproof Workshop, powered by AR15.com, where we discuss knowledge, skills, and ability to help bulletproof your everyday life, everyday performance in whatever your field or passion. Welcome to podcast 028. My next guest started adult studying holistic approaches as a professional life coach, which is very interesting. He received widespread praise for his life-changing video, How to Become Gluten Intolerant, and was off to the races. Discovering the wonderful world of satire, and with the help of satirical city roasting, he has rocketed in popularity. During the pandemic, his political views shifted to more conservative, and he discovered an untapped market in the conservative comedian niche. In recent years, he has appeared or participated in several pro-conservative rallies or summits, ultimately to him being characterized as the conservative conspiracy theorist, which I don't understand how that works.
Are you going off my Wikipedia page?
Yeah, I did. I got a lot of that off there. He's a New Age spiritualist, a 12.5-step book author, acceptance-based thinker, anti-fear promoter, and unapologetic freedom advisor. Please welcome to the show, JP Sears.
Right on. Well, thank you for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it.
I am so excited. I've been, Kevin and I have been like grinning from ear to ear for this day to come. So thank you for taking the time to come out here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a joy to be here, man.
Well, I like to start off all of our podcasts by getting to know our guest a little bit, starting with where did you grow up? But before you start, let's take a quick pause to thank our sponsors. Folks, this show is sponsored by 1776 Insurance. We're talking about comprehensive firearms collection coverage. That also includes your accessories as well as knives. If you've got questions or you want to learn more, please visit 1776insurance.com. All right, and we're back. Without further ado, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small farm town called Bowling Green, Ohio.
Bowling Green.
And have you ever heard of it?
I feel like I have.
A lot of people, the only reason why they would have heard of it, if they did, there's a university there called Bowling Green State University.
Water polo.
Probably.
Yeah, that's how I know him. Water polo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody in the world cared about water polo, but you're the one. Apparently a really hard, brutal sport from what I'm told.
It is very much so.
But I was born and raised there, just farm countries, really great. And then when I was 23, I moved out to San Diego, California.
Really?
Yeah.
What prompted that?
So when you were reading my Wikipedia conspiracy theorist page, Jeff, you mentioned my background in holistic health, life coaching. So I got connected with a guy who I started studying from, took all his courses, correspondence, like VHS tapes at the time.
Oh, wow.
His name's Paul Chek, and he's got his institute called the Chek Institute in the San Diego area.
Nice.
Teaching amazing stuff about exercise for sports performance, as well as rehabilitation, getting people out of pain, all in like a really functional, holistic way. It fascinated me.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I started studying this stuff actually when I was 18. I dropped out of college after a few months. For the first time in my life, I felt passionate about learning about something.
Yeah.
So I immersed myself into his stuff, took my first in-person course with him when I was 20. Then a few years later, he called me up and said, JP, would you be willing to come out, move to San Diego and work with me at the Institute?
Shit.
And so that's what I did. It was, he's my first and such a powerful mentor. I learned so much from, as far as both technical skills in that industry, but also so much in the way of life lessons. So being able to work with Paul Chek is what took me out to San Diego.
Well, what's great is like later in the podcast, one of the questions that I had was, tell us a little bit about a mentor who impacted you in a positive way. And like, how did that come about? So early in your life to have had that experience is awesome.
It really is. I feel so blessed that it happened. And also to give myself a little bit of credit, I rose to the occasion in the sense where when I showed up to take my first class with Paul Chek, I was by far the youngest, most inexperienced person, probably no business being there, but I was the most prepared. I knew the anatomy better than anybody else.
Nice.
So he was really drawn to me based on, I think, impressed with my level of preparation and hard work that goes into it. So connected with him there, and he's, I think, a pretty wise dude. He said, JP, one day you're going to be working with me out at the Institute, and you're going to be traveling the world, and you'll be known.
Wow.
As like a just idiot 20-year-old, he told me this, but it kind of like, cool, panned out to be true. But the biggest thing I learned in that like first meeting with him, I saw how he believed in me. Ooh. Someone who I so respected. I had him on a pedestal. He's basically like a rock star in my eyes. So seeing him believe in me vastly more than I believed in me, it taught me how to believe in myself based on the level of belief he had in me. Sure. So many lessons I learned from him, but that was a stone that was dropped into the pond of me that has ripple effects that still affect me to this day.
That's one of the reasons why I like asking that question about mentors. We sometimes, maybe not everybody, but some folks will not value what a mentor can do for you or do for a group. And I can remember some of my first mentors. They were what we didn't call them mentors. We called them sea daddies. And these guys were, again, like heroes, if you will. And I looked up to them just as you did. And one of the things that I took away was how I wanted to be like them.
Yeah.
I wanted to, like, what did they do? What were the little things that they did regularly? Because this is something else I learned early on, was that it wasn't a single act. It was the culmination of all these little acts that really made the difference. So I was like glue on them, man. Everywhere they went, I'd just be like this little, what are you doing? How you do that? What's going on there? And I'm sure at some point it got a little annoying for some of them, but like that was like, I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn how, because I respected them and because I wanted to be like them, I figured if I just studied them, maybe someday I will be.
Yeah. For anybody who doesn't like the idea of mentors, to me, that's complete self-sabotage.
For sure.
Because connecting with a mentor, whether it's someone like they're in your field and you're just getting mentored by them in one way or another, or you're paying a legitimate mentor for their services. A mentor is like a time machine. Oh. They have so much life experience, skill experience, that, what they've learned in 30, 40 years, however long they've been doing it, you get to, like, that's pre-digested knowledge.
For sure.
Instead of taking you 30 years, it can take you, 3 years. Man. So to me, a mentor, it just accelerates time travel to destination of wherever we're going in our life and pursuit.
I love how you explain that, the time machine, because it's a great way of thinking about it, especially for folks like some of the kids my son's age, who's early 20s. I've talked to them and try to get inside of their little bubble of what makes them think. And I've asked them, I'm like, well, why don't you guys get together with some other, guys that you like that do things better than you and figure out how to do them better than them. What? Oh no, we don't want to do that. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just maybe nerves sometimes too, to approach somebody that can be tough.
Yeah. I would speculate because I get nerves and I get intimidated. I would speculate a lot of times it's an unwillingness to feel insecure. Ooh, because I'll notice for myself, sometimes, I'm doing comedy shows and there's a comedian, whether I know of them or they're there, but they're great.
Yeah.
I'll get insecure and it's kind of like, dude, I'm afraid to be around this person. And it's just, I'm afraid to feel my own insecurity.
Yeah.
But being around this person will make me better.
Yes.
And yes, there's the discomfort.
Yes.
We get to hide from our insecurities when we avoid the people that are going to provoke them.
So true.
So when they can do something we can't, or they're better at it, that's the best thing for us. But that's what provokes our insecurities.
I love how too, the fear, that's something too that a lot of people repress, is rather than what am I actually afraid of? Am I actually afraid of looking bad in front of my peers? Am I actually afraid of being embarrassed in front of them or not living up to their expectations? And like, that's what I've tried to explain to my kids through my own failures is like, hey, like you can't run away from them forever. Yeah. You're going to have to confront them at some point. And it's a lot easier when they're a small little monster versus this big giant monster when you have to confront them.
Yeah. I think a really self-aware person can tell you about their relationship with fear.
Yeah.
And usually people who aren't self-aware enough to tell you about their relationship with fear, they're controlled by their fear.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I won't pretend to be the world's bravest person. I'm not. I've never been on a battlefield. Yeah. Everything brave I've done is just fake bravery. It's not shit that's going to hurt me. It's just psychological. So speaking from a place of basically pure ignorance, something I've learned, I think a lot of people who are stuck, whether it's afraid to approach a mentor or go after something, the relationship with fear is one where they're afraid to be afraid.
Yes.
And therefore you have an emotional charge about the emotion, and that emotional charge tries to take you away from the emotion. So you avoid doing the things that are going to provoke it.
Yes.
But I think the warrior mentality, their relationship with fear is one of embracing it, where it says, okay, fear, I will feel you and I will do the thing anyway, which will actually make me feel you more. For a little while. Yeah. But then you acclimate and eventually you get to the other side of fear, and what used to make you afraid now probably makes you excited.
Oh, it's so true. And that's such a great way to put it. I was just talking about this, a couple of days ago, my first skydiving experience, jumping out of an airplane. You know, there's very few things I think that can elicit a fear response quite like, you know, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. And I can remember very much, you know, and the way that you explained it, like, you know, you're going to confront that fear and perhaps become even more intimate with that fear because you're choosing to close with that fear. And then as a result of that, you become somewhat inoculated or maybe just less afraid of that fear.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like, you know, when you're in the gym, say you haven't worked out your whole life, you go to the gym and, you know, doing a 100-pound bicep curl. It's like impossible. You can't do it. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you keep working at it, after a while, you're repping out the 100 pounds and it's not even heavy enough for you. So I think like the exposure to the fear, it makes the psychological muscles stronger.
Oh, so true.
And maybe the actual fear stimulus never changes, but our perception of it changes because now we're lifting it with well-conditioned muscles in our psyche rather than just flaccid, weak as shit, degenerate muscles that we always are.
I'll take the latter. I like the latter. The visual image I have is much better of the latter. So San Diego was a first stop on your journey, but how did you like San Diego? It's like one of my stomping grounds. So
yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
So I love the whole San Diego area.
Yeah.
I lived in North County, San Diego.
Oh,
so
nice.
To me, it's the best part of San Diego.
Sure.
And it was great.
Yeah.
Especially for that phase of life from 23 to 33.
Yeah. Oh, wow. 10 years.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was great.
Yeah.
And towards my tail end of it, just my preferences started changing. You know, the overcrowding, it's just the reality of Southern California, population density. And then there's some quality of life that connects with that. Cost of living super high. Take you 45 minutes to drive a mile. So I was ready to be done with it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I moved on, yet the time there was amazing. And anytime I'm going back on business or anything, it's needless to say, San Diego has a very sweet spot in my heart.
Without a doubt. I can so sympathize. Luckily, I lived on Coronado, so we really didn't have to do a lot of driving. Yeah. So that was fortunate for us. And I do love going back there. I hate to admit it, you know, like I'm on camera too. I like to go to California. You know, I hate saying that, but
you came out of the closet.
Yeah, I did.
Lose all your viewers.
Oh no, I've been canceled. Ooh.
And you support Gavin Newsom, Jeff. He told me off air.
So true. But I enjoy going back there. I do like my trips are short enough to where I get there, I like it, I see my friends, I enjoy the weather, the climate, the scenery. And then all that other ugly stuff creeps in and I'm ready to go home.
Sure.
But so the trips are perfect. They're just enough. All right. So San Diego leads you to where?
Then for San Diego, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, I love that town too.
Me too.
Damn.
It's great.
It is a nice place. Yeah. So, what brought you there?
And an ex-girlfriend. We met and I felt like, hey, I feel done with San Diego. She lived in Charleston and we were thinking about, is she going to move to San Diego or am I going to move there? And originally she was going to move to San Diego, but I said, you know what? I love Charleston.
Yeah.
Been there half a dozen times and I feel graduated from California. So I moved out to Charleston and that relationship, of course, went down the toilet. And so I was there for 4 years before I moved here to the Austin area. Almost 6 years ago.
Wow, has it been that long?
Yes, yeah.
So coming to Austin, like let's kind of like circle back to when did you start? Like when did you find or discover your newfound talent for just making fun of everything?
Yeah, October 5th, 2014 was the date I published my first real comedy video.
Yeah.
And I had moved to Charleston about 6 months before that. So that was kind of like where I did the home birth of my comedy.
Yeah.
No plan for it to be anything other than one stupid video nobody will care about.
I was wondering, was that intentional? Because it was, first of all, it was amazing. It's like, it was great. And I loved what I appreciate about it is just how well prepared and planned out it was, because it's just so awesome. It takes shots at everything so well. But so that was like not your intention?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Everything, I feel blessed. There's been a lot of success with what I've done. And all of it has been by accident. Never had an intelligent plan. Still don't. Other than to see what's working and then do more of that. So happy accident. I feel, what I started doing was just Forrest Gumping my way along. Like, I made a comedy video and I liked doing that.
I like that. Forrest Gumping.
Yeah. No plan. Just literally too dumb to have a plan. Just following my heart and then decide, well, maybe I'll make another comedy video. And then probably after 9 months of doing comedy videos every once in a while, I realized something like, oh, this doesn't feel like a temporary thing anymore. I feel like I'm tapping into a very sustainable well of creativity. And then moving forward, after about 2 years, I let go of my previous career, the health coaching, which was great. I loved it. Yeah. But there was something greater that wanted to come my way and it needed space. Yeah. So it was scary, but I let go of a good thing in order to let a better thing come in.
Nice. Yeah. So there's that fear again.
Yeah. Fear. It seems like it's part of the human condition.
Right. So what I love is that, like, what prompted you to even do the video in the first place? Was it just, frustration? Was it, hey, I'm bored, I might as well do something cool? Or, what was kind of going through your mind?
Yeah, I think probably a combination of amusement and frustration. So the
perfect combination.
Yeah. You get some angry energy, but also some happy energy. Don't come across completely psychotic, just schizophrenic.
Just a little.
So, and also having lived in California for 10 years was a prompt as well. Because I said, I had freshly moved to Charleston. And while I was in California, I was pretty into like the new age spirituality, which is pretty rampant there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learned amazing things, like really great life-changing principles and perspectives. But while I was there, I realized like everybody wearing the white fucking shirts and beads, just realizing there is so much egotistical nature in this community as there is in any community. But the difference here was because everybody's spiritual, they don't acknowledge their ego. In fact, they'll tell you, I had people tell me, hey man, I don't have an ego anymore, which is the most egotistical thing you can say.
I've risen above my ego.
Says my ego. And so I was realizing these people's egotistical nature, it's hiding behind these noble looking hiding spots. Therefore, they never check themselves. They never check for their ego there. Like, hey, I meditate. How long do you meditate? Only 20 minutes. Well, I'm 60 every day.
So lame.
I'm more spiritual than you. So I had a lot that I had observed and certainly realized everything I'm observing, I've done.
Yeah.
And observing it in the external community. And I wanted an outlet to express what I'm seeing. So the first comedy video I did was called How to Be Ultra Spiritual, which was really just taking the piss out of all that egotistical stuff in the spiritual community. And that perspective was combined with what's always been a pretty rampant, strong sense of humor.
Yeah.
Natural personality.
I love that.
So those experiences is what prompted me to make my first video.
So at this point, any regrets?
No. Well, the only regret, and I'm going to be one of those assholes who says like, I hate regrets because there's always lessons. Yeah. Acknowledging that, but also being real with the question. Yeah. Really, my only regret would be not believing in myself more earlier, as well as I think in the beginning, I cared more about people's approval. So I might have something a little bit more bold to say, but I wouldn't say that out of like, well, I don't want to piss off the audience or lose audience. Yeah. But then, when the powers that be launched the pandemic and I see freedom getting eroded, that change, it's like, I no longer care about approval. I love that. Care about standing for something far greater than that. So that would be the only thing. Believe in yourself more and don't worry about people's approval. If we're talking about regrets,
but those are just such valuable pieces of information and advice. I want approval from my peers. I want approval from, in my profession. I get that. I do understand that. But at a certain point, if that's all I'm chasing, I'm not being true to myself. Yeah. I kind of I become somebody else or something else. I'm doing something for somebody else or something else. And I lose my perspective on who I am.
Yeah. And you mentioned like approval from peers or I think being selective of whose approval is beneficial, because from the right people, a mentor, a peer, a trusted friend. Exactly. Their approval matters because it's engineered to help take us in the direction of our best self 100%. To accomplish but the approval of people on Twitter, anonymous, that approval, I think, takes us away from ourselves.
Quick word from our sponsor. We've been working with the folks at 1776 for comprehensive insurance of our firearms collections, and I'm really happy with how things are going so far. And one of my concerns is with the amount of commuting that I do with my firearms collection. What happens should my vehicle be broken into or stolen with my firearms? And there's reason to have this concern because there's 800,000 vehicles stolen per year in America. So it's not, it's a little bit more common than we might think. What I mentioned earlier is that they have a comprehensive insurance plan, which is that they will cover your firearms stolen out of your vehicle, or should your vehicle be stolen, cover the firearms that were in the vehicle. So that's pretty reassuring in a sense. So I've mentioned this before, but the process to apply is pretty easy. Approval is pretty quick. They do not require you provide a itemization or serialized numbers. There's no appraisal or schedules that you have to provide. So really all you want to do is just make sure you have proof of ownership, and that's it. So if you want to learn more about the folks from 1776 and insuring your firearms collection, visit 1776insurance.com.
If you think back to your childhood, did you ever imagine that you would be doing what you're doing now? Was there something in your childhood that kind of like was a potential seed of growth that eventually got watered and got some sunlight?
I think so, but I certainly didn't see it as a seed at the time. So what I didn't see, I didn't have the self-esteem. I had like kind of normal self-esteem, secure moments, insecure moments, just normal shit. So I didn't have the self-esteem to believe my sense of humor could be worth anything on the like professional comedic front. So I never had any level of belief of me doing anything quote unquote big relative to the status quo.
Interesting.
But the seeds that were planted as a kid, I would deal with both joy and challenge through humor.
Oh, yeah.
So, times my parents were going through separations and things like that, or just, people treat me like crap at school. So the way I would deal with those insecurities was by making jokes.
Yeah.
Because if I can make you laugh, I'm getting a smile out of you.
Yeah.
That's approval. That makes me also feel secure in the moment. And that lasts for almost 30 seconds.
And I do it again.
Which means it's time for another joke. You get a lot of repetitions.
There you go.
So, and then also, not to make it sound all shadowy, humor was also a way I brought joy to my life and people around me. I had like boarding school, but if I could make a joke, like now my day is just much more entertaining. So there were seeds planted and watered. And, I remember my dad, like there'd be times I'm just kind of putting on an impromptu show and, making my dad laugh just would like make my heart so happy. So like that kind of interaction, making my family laugh, seeing them like see a brilliance coming out of me, even though I'm 10. I think that was also part of like the fertilization of the seeds.
That's awesome. First of all, I can't imagine life without laughter. I just can't even begin to, like, that's scary. That's a scary thought. And like the times that have been really like either very uncomfortable, very painful, very dark, whatever, trying to navigate those without laughter. And I don't know. I can remember many times, being in a training scenario or even on an operation and it's just shitty, like that our job was to do things in the worst possible conditions and the worst possible environment and the worst possible times.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. Sign me up. Sorry, Navy, for poo-pooing on your recruitment there. But I can remember so many times that we'd be sitting there, I'd stop and my swim buddy he'd walk up to me. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I would just like crack a joke. And it just somehow kind of like broke that suffering for a moment.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
It's a tension release.
Yes.
So, I'm not that I've been through any level of Navy SEAL training, but I'd imagine, after, hours, days, weeks, months, that atmosphere that you're in, there's so much tension. You're doing like life-endangering stuff, so much physical hardship, mental hardship. You just imagine how much tension is in that atmosphere of your world. But if you can poke a hole in it, lets out some of the pressure.
Oh, dude. So I'll go back because that's a great way to explain my first skydive. We do a bunch of groundwork locally. Then we fly out to California and we do a little bit more groundwork before we go up in the birds. And when they reference, first pass, first stick, first jumper. So that was me. I was the very first person to jump out of the plane. And the way you do it is you got to back out. So you can't even see the doorway. You can't. It's an abyss that you're walking towards. And the jump master gives my chaser, who's the guy who's going to make sure I don't die. He's going to give him the green light, and he's got a hold of my chest rig, and he leans up. It's really loud, obviously, but he leans in and he yells a joke, which to this day I cannot recall. I have no idea what the joke was, but I just started laughing, and he just pushed me out of the plane. And I remember seeing the tail of the aircraft floating away from me, and then I see the ground, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. It's not that bad. I'm still kind of laughing a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay. I got a big smile on my face and land, get my parachute. And I'm thinking, okay, that wasn't so bad. Okay. Yeah, I could do this. We go up. I'm the first jump, first pass, first stick. And the chaser, he is holding on my chest rig. I see the green light from the jump master and I'm just like waiting. Where's the joke? And he's like, there's no joke. You got to do this on your own this time. I'm like, oh. So there was a little bit of tension release. And then it built right back up. But for that moment, that very first jump, I don't even remember. I mean, I don't remember what that joke was, but I laughed my ass off. Yeah. And just like as soon as he pushed me out of the airplane, and it wasn't like a shove, it just kind of like, because you're literally your toes on the ramp, you're like poised to fall out. He just gently pushed. And like, I just remember laughing, and then I'm outside of the airplane. Yeah. Okay. So laughter is I think one of God's gifts to us as far as like coping through life.
Man, I agree. It's just like our sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, hearing, sense of touch. They're all gifts from God. And our sense of humor is one of those senses as well.
Yeah, I like that.
It's not like we can see our eyes. Like this is where our sense of vision comes from.
Yeah.
But our sense of humor, it's a little bit more ambiguous because it's a psychological formation. Yet I do believe it's just as important as the other sentences, because you think like, what does a life look like with someone who doesn't laugh? And we see people who don't laugh.
Man.
And to me, it usually looks like a life not worth living.
Oh, just very
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of all time, Oscar Wilde, he says, life is too important to take seriously. And I think that's a reminder to bring the levity of laughter. And obviously, like not everywhere at all times should we be cracking jokes, but even a little joke in a big situation like your first skydiving experience, just a little grain of salt.
Yeah.
Add something.
So I'm laughing because we had another guest on our show. Amazing defense lawyer, was involved in one of the most high profile defense cases of our time. And his opening statement was a knock knock joke. And he thought it was, he said it. And there was like, no, like at that moment he realized, okay, in my head, I thought this was going to go better. So it was not good. So like you said, there's a time and a place for the jokes, and knock knock jokes. Definitely. So I just thought that was hilarious that he actually had the balls to do that
in court.
In court. Yeah.
Wow.
It's his opening statement. Knock knock.
Judges seem like
it was like more towards the juries, he was trying to he was trying to do exactly what we just described. He was trying to lighten the mood. He was trying to bring everybody off this tense kind of, obviously it's a life or death situation in the court of law, but there was so much tension in the courtroom. He was describing, watching the defense go into the prosecution go into their opening statements that he's like, I gotta do something that's just too much. And he thought that the knock knock joke would do it, but he, regretted it later. All right. So you moved to Austin and you realized that this is your life's work now. This is your passion. This is what you want to be doing.
Yeah. Unless I get order changes from above, which, I'll do my best to be aware of if and when they come in. But yeah, this seems like the passion. It seems, foreseeable future doing what I'm doing. And for me, I look at comedy maybe different than a normal comedian. I look at comedy as just a tool. And what do I want to use this tool to accomplish?
Yes.
In the past 3 years, the primary objective is helping awaken people to protect, preserve, and celebrate the greatest God-given gift we'll ever be given, which is our freedom.
Oh, thank you.
And it's just something I used to take for granted. Not proud of that, but it's true.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest about it. So I use the language of comedy to hopefully awaken people to the preciousness of freedom.
Oh my God.
It slips away if we allow it, and freedom is what makes life worth living. So for me, the North Star is freedom, both personal freedom. We're all a tyrant to ourselves, as well as obviously external forces. So the language of comedy is just how I try to speak those messages.
So you said this a little bit earlier, like during the government imposed lockdowns, pandemic, you saw things changing. And it was at that moment that you kind of changed. What did you like change in your like your mindset, or did you just change your direction?
Both.
Ooh.
My mindset had a big piece of real estate slip away. And the piece of real estate that slipped away was this notion of what I thought the world was, America was, and what I thought the world will be going into the future. And seeing tyranny happen in the United States of America. Every one of our constitutional rights has been trampled the past 3 years.
For sure.
And knowing a little bit about history can recognize patterns of tyranny, which means you're in another time machine.
Yeah.
You get to see where this pattern goes.
Yes.
If you allow it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, pretty much right off the bat, my conclusion was this pandemic isn't really about a virus.
Yeah.
It's about other stuff. Goalposts keep moving.
Yes.
Policies are implemented that run completely contrary to data and the realities that are proving to be true. You see censorship come out. Censorship is only used in tyranny. Tyranny can't exist without censorship because truth is the principal enemy of tyranny.
For sure.
Tyranny can't exist if truth is running free. So seeing all the censorship coupled with all those other variables, it woke me up.
Yeah.
And so there was the mindset shift. I had to let go of how I thought things were, how I thought they would be, grasp the reality, like, shit, all right, this is going on. I don't even have the full picture.
Yeah.
Still don't, but have some clues.
Yeah.
So my mindset shifted and right around that time, April 7th, 2020, that's the day I found out my wife was pregnant.
Oh, yay.
That woke something up inside of me.
Yeah, that'll do it too.
You have kids, so like, all right, you have a child coming into this world. Now there's this God-given force that comes through to want to protect your child at all costs. And
100%.
part of protecting them is protecting their future.
For sure.
I just became aware, like, there's conversation I'm never willing to have with my son one day where I have to explain to him two things. One, what freedom was. And two, why his father didn't do shit about it while he had an opportunity to contribute to the promotion of freedom. So that my mindset shifted real quick. And then the nature of my work and what I was doing in comedy shifted, basically synchronized with my mindset.
Perfect. Man, I'll tell you, so much of what you said, it really impacts me. The fortune, if you will, I mean, it may not have always been fortune of traveling the world, is seeing how other civilizations, other societies, other countries govern and live. And I don't know if I ever took it for granted, the freedoms that we have in the States, because I could see what was apparent in other countries. Like what I think the awakened moment that I had was when I realized that the government was not just complicit in protecting our freedoms, but actually at the root of destroying them. Like causing the reason that we're fighting for many of our freedoms is because the government is trying to take them away. And I think I had a really hard time acknowledging that our government would do that, having traveled the world and seen like no shit, like political assassinations, this disarming of the societies that are there, the actual, like the media, the propaganda machine controlled by one organization in its own desire. Its only point of living is to promote the agenda that the government says is okay. Yeah. And that's it. No other option. No, there's no other alternative to any voices. So I saw it in those countries and you just are aware of it. But when I started to see it and feel it here, that kind of was, first I didn't want to believe it. Yeah. Not going to lie. I was like, everybody's overreacting. Everybody's like, that could never happen here. But just like you, at some point, you just have to acknowledge the realities. You know, like you said, it was like very well coordinated, one little stone at a time. Nothing huge at one. Well, except for like, we're going to lock you down. You can't leave. Okay. That was a pretty big step, I thought. But all the other subsequent little steps just kind of continue. And the old adage, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. Not just one major event. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah.
It very similar for me. I always imagine tyranny and intense government authoritarianism. That happens over there.
Exactly.
Not here.
Exactly.
And I always had this fictitious story in my mind that when a tyrannical government shows up, they're honest about it. Like, hey guys, we're here to do tyranny. We're corrupt. We're doing crimes against humanity. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, no, of course, if they're willing to kill people, they're not honest. They have no qualms about lying. So, looking at our government, it's like, well, they're not telling us they're doing tyranny. So I guess they're not.
They're not, yes.
So it took me a while. And then, that it's so familiar. It's like, well, that's a white guy speaking English and look at his nice suit. Like, that's not how a tyrannist works.
No. Yeah.
So, man, but yeah. And then you also mentioned a few of, I think, the scariest words in human existence that could never happen here.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that mechanism of denial, denial is the first stage of grieving out of the 5 stages of grieving. And I know so at least for me, I had to grieve the loss of what I thought our country is. Now, I'll still say I think America is the greatest country on earth. We're founded on the best possible principles.
Yeah.
And I think we absolutely can become, again, what America was intended to be.
I love hearing that.
Yet I had the denial and my grieving going on as well of like, well, that could never happen here.
Yeah.
But then I realized, and I think this is true, the mentality that says that could never happen here is the exact mentality that allows it to happen here.
So true.
Because your radar's down. You're literally in denial.
Yep.
You don't see what's in front of you. You fall for the gaslighting.
Yes.
You fall for the propaganda justification.
The intimidation.
We're locking you in a home because of a virus. Oh, well, this isn't about obedience. It's a virus. They're protecting us.
Yes, and denying us toilet paper.
I know.
I still don't understand that. Nobody can explain it to me.
Screw the food. Where's the toilet paper?
We'll really screw them. They'll never figure this out. Okay, so first of all, I'm so glad that the denial thing, like, kind of hurt my pride because I'm like, wait a minute, I've traveled all over the country. I know what this looks like. I know what tyranny looks like. I know what freedoms at the, that are on the wrapped around the noose looking about ready to perish. I know what that looks like, but yet I still didn't want to admit it here. So, that took some time, I think. And when it finally came about, like, it changed my perspective. My direction that I took was I need to help spread education and training for new gun owners. We saw so many new gun owners come out of the pandemic that my goal,
one of them sitting across from you.
And my goal was, okay, I need to provide the training and education, I need to give it to them as widespread. Because the way I was looking at it, when I looked at all those other countries, the one thing that stood apart from all those other countries was they did not have a Second Amendment.
Isn't that powerful?
It is.
We have a Second Amendment. Over the pandemic, like Australia, and I think they're still going on. They have these concentration camps, COVID camps. China has them. Yeah. Canada's got Canadian stuff. Why didn't our government go that far? And people have been telling me, JP, because we have the Second Amendment. Yeah. It's like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
It's so
why
true.
That needs to be there.
I have had so many conversations with folks that, and to use your term, that were awoken to that simple concept. Like, let's just follow this through a logical conclusion. If we did not have the Second Amendment and you refused and you learned that this was no longer helpful, this was actually hurtful, and you learned this and you are still trying to protect your family, but you have no means to do that at this point because you no longer have firearms. They're gone, vanished. How do you feel about that now? Oh, well, the government's not going to overstep their bounds. Are you sure about that? Because, 14 days to flatten the curve turned into what again?
Yeah.
It's like, like all the justification that I have seen for the steps that they took, to me, never justified. We're never justified in the beginning. Because, we now that we've learned so much about what really is going on with the pandemic or the virus, we realized that it was largely survivable. Like if you were healthy and you were in the right demographic, you were good, and everybody else sure had to worry. But, there was other things. It was that worth risking. And like, I just am so thankful. I guess all of that's just to say, I'm so thankful that the Second Amendment was part of our founding fathers' dream for our future. And so many countries bitch and moan about their whatever, the good. There can be no good without a bad. I get that. But they're always focusing on the bad. And I'm like, well, here's something that's pretty damn good. Our government is in check in a sense because they just, they can only take it so far. And luckily, I think we're seeing a shift. So during the pandemic, when you shifted in your mindset, I'm sure that came with a little bit of pushback. Did you feel it?
A little bit. I would say I felt it. It didn't alter my center of gravity.
Nice.
And the pushback came, I started talking about politics, which the point wasn't to talk about politics. The point was to be pro-freedom.
Yeah.
It just so happened, for whatever reason, freedom became a political issue in the United States of America. One side was largely pro-freedom. The other side became very anti-freedom.
Yeah.
And of course, with all the justifications for your protection, you're killing your grandma. But again, I thought we lived in a country where it's founded on freedom. Both sides are for freedom.
Yeah.
They might disagree about policies to express the freedom. So of course I'm pro-freedom and calling out tyranny, which means I'm being political. And never had before. So of course there's pushback from some of the audience initially.
Interesting.
And the pushback would show up as comments, all the typical smears. Well, you're just saying that because you're racist, transphobe, homophobe, misogynistic. That's pretty much the list.
That's it. That is the list. It's like the top 5. You made you made the top 5.
Got them. and as I was starting to do that, I had a worry like, dude, I might lose a lot of my audience.
Yeah.
And I'm still willing to do this because there's a principle and a purpose here. So I'm willing to lose what I have in the name of fulfilling the duty as I saw it. It just so happened to be that the support was monumentally greater than any pushback. My audience never grew faster than when I started being pro-freedom, a conservative comedian. And one of the things that taught me was, contrary to what you see in the news, the propaganda tells you, if you're whatever against lockdowns, just pro-freedom. Basically, if you're a conservative, they try to frame it, you're the only one.
Yeah.
You're defective. You're alone.
Defective.
Nobody else is like
you're
you.
Broken.
Yeah. But spoiler alert, the truth is very different than the narrative.
It is.
My experience, as well as continuing to travel the country doing comedy shows, after a month of pandemic, into the pandemic, started doing some shows again. So traveling the country, I realized no, freedom lovers are on the side of the majority.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of people who are like, whatever, communism will probably work this time. But all the support, I realized, no, freedom-minded people, this is still America. Freedom-minded people are the majority. They don't get the majority of the airtime in the mainstream media.
Without a doubt.
But the mainstream media is not a portrayal of reality.
Yeah, that is for sure. I kind of see the way I look at your kind of your direction, your mission, if you will, is that you're kind of behind enemy lines, and you're kind of you're meeting up with other agents, and you're consorting with them in a sense to help kind of bolster their, you're bringing them information that they take and then move on, and they go into their little corners of the world wherever they live, and they share that information. And then before you know it, it's all of a sudden all this extra stuff. I mean, when you travel the country to do your shows and you see the support from all of the pro-freedom loving people, which that's a great way to also destigmatize the labels that a lot of the other folks will use. They'll call you all different types of names, but when you just kind of stand on the pedestal of, no, I'm just pro-freedom.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Whatever insult you throw at me, it won't change the fact that I'm pro-freedom. And so I like the fact that you can connect with so many people in such in a way that's not just entertaining, but also kind of, again, it helps to break down barriers. I mean, laughter does such a great job of lowering tensions and lowering walls and kind of extending I would go so far as to say extending friendship to other people, that may not necessarily have the same view as you, but we all laugh. We all can laugh at things that are comical. We may not like them, especially if you're, oh yeah, that was me. Yeah, I was telling my neighbor that they're going to kill my grandmother, and now, oh yeah, that was me. Hey, sorry, that kind of thing. We're seeing I feel like some folks are like forgetting that they were those people, but maybe through laughter they can kind of like get past that and kind of move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we have to laugh at ourselves.
Right.
We're all wrong at times. We're probably all wrong most of the time.
I would say I got like an 80-20, wrong 80% of the time.
And, we're all full of shit. That's why God gave us an asshole to remind us how full of shit we are. And we
almost lost it.
And we don't have to have shame about it.
Yeah.
We can actually laugh about it.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I was so wrong about that. Yeah. And the laughter helps transform the psychological scar tissue of what we were holding on to, helps break it up so that we can experience new growth into like where we're at now and what's true. What are the latest beliefs that through our best discernment seem accurate today?
Oh God, man, I love that. I mean, I guess the biggest lesson that I hope everybody can take away from laughter is just try not to take yourself so seriously.
Yeah.
And just try to have fun. You get one life. That's it. This is it. And a life again without laughter just seems bleak.
Yeah.
Is the best, I don't know. We could use a lot of other words, but I don't want to be a part of that life at all. Now, when you started to do more of your pro-freedom type videos and skits, like what was like an area that you really wanted to focus on? Was there something in particular that you just like, I'm going to target this area and I'll do some splattering over here, but I really want to hit this one area?
Yeah. It's shifted with different, phases over the past few years. I think initially a lot of it was like, for example, taking the piss out of Fauci and poking holes in his narrative, trying to slip through some alternative facts without getting deplatformed.
Yes.
And then, pro-gun, anti-gun, that debate, like let's disarm our society, give your guns to people who have guns that are pointing their guns at you to protect you. That's been a phase. And of course, we recycle back to different phases. And I think a phase I'm in now, not that every single video I do is dedicated to this, but it's a reoccurring theme. And the phase that's most important to me now is preserving the minds of our children.
Oh, yes.
The ideological stuff around gender myths and
oh my God.
Indoctrination into what looks like a straight path to being groomed, whether it's via schools or people doing drag shows for children or saying, hey, pedophiles aren't bad. They're just minor attracted people. No, they're objectively very bad. That much has to be acknowledged.
Oh, God.
So children are innocent. They need to be protected. So calling out it's a shitty disguise. Some people fall for it, but what's barely disguised as love and acceptance is just complete violating of children's minds. So that to me is so important in this time. And that, I mean, people, the light's really being shined. It's great.
Yeah.
I think that mess is being eroded away in a good way.
Thank goodness.
But there's still a lot of work to do and persistence to keep shining the light on what I would call the evilness of it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's scary. Like, I'm grateful that my kids have moved out of public school. They graduated and whatnot, but trying to navigate that scene, that whole subject these days, and trying to put your child's safety as the most important thing and being turned away or in some cases, demonized because you're anti this, anti that, or whatever term you want to use. Like, I feel like all the last 2-3 years, all those terms that were thrown at us, all that's ever really done is it's It's taken away any, like, now what is really a racist? Like, what does that really mean anymore? And like, does that word actually have any real energy behind it anymore? Because it's been so abused. Yeah. I question it.
I so agree with you. I think like actual racism is just a heinous form of hate.
Yeah.
It's atrocious. And that word racism, when used appropriately and accurately, it's an important word because it helps us recognize something that is really crappy so we can do better.
Yeah.
But now that term's being diluted because
so much.
You hear someone supports Trump. Oh, well, that's a racist. Well, what if I told you he's a black guy? Well, that's a black white supremacist. He is very racist. That black guy really hates black people. That's not okay. He says me, the white guy. So it's so diluted.
It is.
It's like the boy who cried wolf.
I know.
The wolf is being cried for all the time. So now when there's actually a wolf on, which is not the majority of the time, but there's wolves.
Yeah, there are.
There's actual racism. The word has very little meaning anymore, unfortunately.
Well, that's what bothers me the most is that they've used these terms and they've, when we need those terms to be used, they no longer really have that. I mean, like, it's like now when I hear it on the news, I'm like, is it really?
Yeah.
Are we sure? I'm not going to invest in it. I'm just not going to put any energy into that. So that's where I think, like being able to recalibrate the mindset through comedy, in a sense, to kind of like bring these subjects out, talk about them, have some laughs because that's important, and then realize, you're kind of a jerk for thinking that in the first place, but let's just laugh about it. Let's move on. Let's just like learn from that and try to move forward. So speaking of moving forward, what are your plans for the future? What are you thinking? Are you going to kind of keep on this pathway for a while?
Yeah, I'll keep on this pathway, and I guess what my expression is on this pathway, I'm pretty unattached to. I mean, right now, my major expression on this pathway is I do comedy videos and I do live comedy shows.
Yeah.
I love doing both.
Yeah.
And I'm also kind of unattached. If there's some kind of guidance of there's a different expression to add to it, or one of them falls away, or something's added to it, I'm open to that, whatever that could be.
Nice.
But for me, the pathway of promoting freedom and promoting people getting in touch with their own critical thinking, their own heart, that's a very important pathway that I think has a long way to go for what little contribution I can add to it. Well, so, that, and then also going in the future, fatherhood is so important to me.
Yeah.
So being the best dad I can be, not taking a second for granted with my son. Life is precious, and man, just being the best dad I can be, soaking in all the time with my son. That's that's probably one of the more important paths to me. Family, freedom, fitness, and faith. They're all up there, but to me, family is the core. That has to be there before anything else can really topple on and make sense.
Well, I will tell you that, like, I used to joke about this, but I was serious. Like, my kids were the best toys I ever got.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't the best father. I made plenty of mistakes. We've had some great discussions with some other guests that have kind of like helped us to understand some of those mistakes and whatnot. But man, it changed my life forever, for the better. No matter what difficulties we had during our the parenting years. But now that they're like quasi adults, it is nice. It's really nice to see that they are moving in the direction of being productive in society. Maybe even actually, like I can relax a little bit and not be so worried about them. That's the one thing that's been hard for me, especially with them during the pandemic, was that they're at that age, that young 20-year-old bracket, where I feel like they were just either leaving high school, leaving college, and having to move into the real world, but having to do that during the pandemic was tough. And so they've recovered from that and are moving forward. But yeah, fatherhood was, I have I'll Tim made a post the other day where he's like, you see all those little fingerprints all over the glass. Yeah. And there's going to be a day when there'll be no more fingerprints. For me, it's like cheese covered dials on the microwave. I'm wiping them off and I'm thinking, I'm all, but there's one day when there's not going to be cheese colored dials anymore, or cheese covered microwave buttons. So it's true. Those little moments, cherish them, enjoy them. It's so much. I mean, like I said, they're the best toys you could have ever gotten. Now, let me ask you this. How do you handle failure?
Well, luckily, Jeff, I'm so perfect. I don't know what failure is.
I haven't had to.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I think on the whole, catch me in a moment of failure, and it'll be more challenging for me to embody these words compared to how easy it is to say, because it's always a struggle when it's like a in the moment experience. But my relationship with failure, I look at it as long as I'm doing my best with logical discernment, which is very different than, hey, I failed because I didn't really try. As long as I'm putting in earnest effort, I look at failure as simply a lesson.
Yeah.
What's the feedback here?
Perfect.
There's probably going to be uncomfortable emotions to feel.
Yep.
It's part of the lesson.
Yep.
But what's the data that this failure is gifting me?
Yeah.
And then doing my best to take that in, modify to the best of my ability, and do the damn thing again. So for me, the idea of perfectionism, I heard a friend of mine, Chris Williamson, say, perfectionism is nothing more than procrastination masquerading in disguise.
Interesting.
And perfectionism, you're failure phobic.
Yes.
I'm waiting till things are perfect before I try. Nope. You're being a pussy. You're not trying because you're actually afraid to fail. So I think failure is inevitable, and looking at it as a lesson, it's not an indictment that me or anybody else is unworthy as a person. So for me, it's a lesson.
Yeah. I loved hearing that. And I think a lot of people answer that question in a very similar way. And I liked how you kind of like framed it. There was whenever we make mistakes, that moment, it is hard. Like, I'm not like, when I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I made a mistake. I'm going to own up to it off air, not on air, but and it was like at that moment, I just was like, no. But, with a little bit of time and guidance, I suppose, from others. Yeah, that was dumb. That was a big mistake. And I can look back at it after the fact, but at that moment, whether it's pride, whether it's ego, whatever it is really hard to acknowledge that mistake or that failure at that moment. And what I've done over the years is I've come to the conclusion that at some point, maybe not at that exact moment, but shortly thereafter, I'll be able to see the mistake, and I'll be able to, more importantly, see the lesson from that mistake. So the follow-up question to that, how you deal with failure, are some of the obstacles that you had to overcome through your career. What was like some of your like go-to strategies for overcoming some of these obstacles? I mean, it's not easy to break into the business, break into the live action comedy business. I know that's a cutthroat industry. Like, what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome for that?
Maybe starting at the some of the challenges, but on the easier side.
Fair enough.
Self-judgment is a big one. Other people's disapproval is another one. Like, all right, those are challenges that need to go through. Failures. There's been plenty of videos I've done that just suck. And,
I haven't seen one yet, but okay.
And part of that, of the failure of that is there's comedic principles that I can learn better. There's more in-depth knowledge of a given topic I could have had. Yeah. So cool. I'm glad I made a shitty video because I learned something. Right. I learned how to do it better next time.
I like that.
New jokes on stage. Like, oh, that one bombed. That
crickets.
Man. And then honestly, I think my biggest failures have been leadership. So now I'm, so blessed. I've got a great team of people around me in my business. And for the longest time, I was not a good leader. I looked at the business stuff and therefore the roles of other people is like, it's kind of inconvenient to have in my life. I'm just, I'm doing this stuff to try to maximize opportunities, but 90% of what matters most is the creative component of the comedy. And I get that. And I've realized that was a failure. There's been plenty of money that I've lost because of my failure of leadership. So certainly recently it's come on my radar of like, okay, JP, time to really recognize and learn the lessons of your failures of leadership.
Interesting.
So now I look at leadership as that's actually more important as a priority than the comedy content. Comedy content, that's kind of become, I'm on cruise control. And of course I put my great effort into everything, but I've just done it so much that it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
So now for me, only because I've done my best to learn lessons from my failure of leadership, I've realized I not only need to, but I really want to step into being a real leader for my team. And letting things change has been the most important kind of mechanism to allow that to happen.
Really?
So changing my schedule, I prioritize team communication before I'm sitting down writing, or this was in place because I didn't have oversight. Got to cut that, got to change that. And here we're moving the ship in this direction. We're making changes.
Love it.
Embracing change has been a really important part to learn lessons from failures.
Oh man. And that's, at the end of the day, your lesson that you learn equals change.
Yeah.
Otherwise you repeat you repeat the same mistake.
Sure do.
Change is so critical. And I hadn't really thought of leadership and change together. That's a really good point. I hadn't really considered that. But like there's the old saying, people fear change.
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of truth in that. But without that, you just are doomed to continue to repeat the same mistakes until you recognize that you do have to change, and then hopefully have the foresight to take on those lessons learned and recognize, okay, this was the mistake. Like you said, I need to implement more oversight here, and you make the change to do that. And you see the benefits. So I hadn't really thought of leadership and change as integral before. So that's really neat. I'm going to have to put more thought into that. Give me another example, just for my own edification.
Example of what?
Of change in your leadership. Yeah.
Being more involved with my team members.
Yeah.
So not in the sense of like I'm out to micromanage anybody.
Yeah.
I think that's actually poor leadership.
Yeah.
But understanding, first off, first off, collectively, where are we all going? That needs to be communicated from me. So there's more communication with the team.
Yeah.
And then understanding, cool, you're working on such and such project. What's going on with that?
Yeah.
And how can I support you supporting that project? And also asking people questions, leveraging their intelligence. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
What do you think we should do?
Yeah.
We've been doing this. Is this still worth it?
Yeah.
So I think what I'm rambling about as far as change is leveraging the brilliance of other people, but establishing the communication and care to let their brilliance come out and shine more.
First of all, I love that. And my thought process with regards to like taking on the challenges of change, we get stuck in doing things a certain way. We are creatures of habit. I am a very strong creature of habit. But when I think back to something that I recognize as a failure that I wanted to learn from, it ultimately led to me changing. Yeah. It ultimately led to me doing something different. And I never really associated change with leadership before, but it's so, that's really made a big kind of big point for me. Like I'm now, now I got to start thinking about more change. All right. Let me ask you this final question. What do you want our audience to take away from this show?
Oh man, I would love for the audience to take away self-trust. We are biofeedback mechanisms of God.
Yes.
And I'm not a religious scholar, but I think we come from God, universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I'll call our creator God. Man, our heart and our critical thinking, our prefrontal cortex, these I think are channels that intelligence from God comes from.
Yeah.
We are free, sovereign, amazing creatures when we let our words and actions stay in alignment with the wisdom of our heart and the wisdom of our own critical thinking. And we start to handicap ourselves with all of our abilities. We basically say yes to the opposite of freedom when we're not trusting our heart, when we're not trusting our gut. So, there's a reason why evil-based propaganda has to be in people's faces 24/7, not only on the news every night, but multiple news shows. Everywhere. They synchronize it. It's in all the mainstream media outlets, the same horse shit.
Yeah.
But if someone is like really pro-freedom, the interesting thing to strengthen our cause, we don't need to brainwash people with anything.
Right.
All we need is for people to be in touch with themselves and trust themselves. Well, you're not going to fall for gaslighting. And I think our true human nature is that of freedom. So the more we're in touch with ourselves and trusting ourselves, even when we're the one going against the herd, humanity has a bright and bold, beautiful future.
For sure.
The more we trust ourselves.
I love that. You said two things in that moment. One was critical thinking. And it dawned on me that one of the things that you do so well is that you challenge people with comedy to be critical of thought. And I know that's a big light bulb moment for me. And I know that's like, duh, Jeff, that's what, come on. That's fuck. We've been on here for like an hour and a half. You just figured that shit out, but like, it just really kind of like, boom, it just went off. I'm like, holy shit, critical thinking through comedy, because it gives you the opportunity to put everything up on the balance on the scale and see what kind of works at the end. Like if we're willing to kind of go out there and talk openly. And that's what comedy is. It's about being open and honest and in many cases laughing your ass off about it. That makes so much more sense to me now. I hadn't really thought of it that way. So that was huge.
Right on. Well, I'm glad you see that. And I'm glad you said that out loud. That gets me to see probably what I wasn't seeing. I'm like, oh yeah, that probably does happen. That's pretty cool.
You're welcome. All right. So where can our audience find out more about you? I know by the time this show airs, your comedy show this Sunday that I'm not going to be at, so sorry, will be long gone, but there's so much more for you to offer, or so much more offerings.
Yeah. The single best place online to check me out is my website, awakenwithjp.com. And that's got all the links to my YouTube, Rumble channels, live comedy shows. Yeah. So awakenwithjp.com is a great place to find me. Or if you find me offensive, that's the best place to avoid on the internet.
Yes. One thing I also love is I love your new merchandise line. Some of those, I meant to tell you something about one of those shirts that I saw. I just was like, brilliant. That was brilliant. And I'll look it up and I'll send it to you. But I'm just like some of those shirts, again, you tackled the subject so well. And it's like right there for everybody to see. I love it. It's awesome.
Oh, right on. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, all right, folks, that's a wrap. I want to thank you, JP, for coming on the show. I had a great time. Thank you for making me laugh. I love laughing. If you haven't figured that out yet, I do love laughing. I want to thank our audience for tuning in. I want to thank our sponsors for supporting us. And I want to thank the men and women that are holding the line. You can check out all our previous podcasts by visiting thebulletproofworkshop.com. Learn more about me and training opportunities by visiting tridentconcepts.com. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. You're listening to the Bulletproof Workshop podcast. Stay safe or be dangerous.